Hey guys, it's Mr. Rogowy here, and I am with you on another tutorial. And today we are looking at panoramas. And you know, a lot of digital devices nowadays include panorama features and seems to be gaining in popularity. And so we're going to look at a few different ways that you can make different panoramas using a variety of files and hopefully getting an interesting result at the end. So open up the folder, and as you can see, we got a bunch of different files to work with here. And we're going to look at, first of all, some raw files that were taken making a panorama. Before that though, actually before that, we're gonna look at this folder called Winter Pano. Open that up. And if we look at the photos inside of this folder, you're going to see that we have basically a panorama that's going around from left to right, clockwise direction, about 180 degrees. Now, one thing that's really important to mention if you haven't done a panorama before is if I go right back to the first one, here's the first shot. If I go to the second shot, you'll notice that there's quite a bit of overlap. Okay, we see the sign here. In our next photo, we see the sign here. And that's really important. In order to get a good panorama, you need to have quite a bit of overlap. I'm going to say about 30 to 50%, maybe even more, depending on how accurate you want it to be. So when you have your camera on a tripod, or however you're doing it, if it's resting on something, make sure that you're overlapping with the picture that was taken previously. Now for this, we don't have to launch any of these photos in Photoshop. We're going to open Photoshop and wait for that to load. And we're going to be looking for a specific menu in here. Now, one thing that's very important to mention is that when you're doing panoramas, your computer may run really slow. It is kind of taxing on the machine to put these pictures together. So go to File, go to Automate, and we're going to go to Photomerge. All right, and this little pop-up window is going to come up. There it is. We're going to go Browse, and I'm going to look for that folder that I just had open. Okay, and just one sec. You know what? I need to cancel that for one sec. I'm going to copy it. I forgot to copy it to the desktop. Now that's an important thing, to make sure that you always copy your files to your desktop or somewhere where it's easy to find, because otherwise you're going to be scrambling to try to find it and it's not fun. Okay, so let's go back. File, Automate, Photomerge. There it goes. Browse, Desktop. I'm going to look for my tutorial folder. There it is. Winter Panorama. And now what I'm doing is I'm holding Shift, clicking the first one, holding Shift, selecting all of them and saying Open. Along the left-hand side, we got all these different options about how it's going to put it together. Auto generally will work pretty well. We want to make sure we have the option of blending images together, because that's important. We want them to go together smoothly. Otherwise, it'll just place them next to each other. Vignette removal. Okay, if we got a bit of a vignette in the corner, that'll try to remove that. And any sort of distortion that's going on, we could put that on. I don't have those issues in this case, so I'm just going to go with blend. It'll save me a lot of time. I'm going to hit OK. Photoshop will do its thing. Takes a little bit. Like I said, panoramas are becoming increasingly more and more popular. They're included on all smartphones now. And generally, they are, again, very popular and being used for a variety of purposes. All right, so depending on what your intended purpose is for your panorama, why do you want to create a panorama? Well, it gives you a broader view of the scene that you're shooting. All right, more realistic to what you might see when you're out there. As you can tell, takes a while to put them together. What it's doing is comparing the pictures with one another. And we'll wait for that. Depending on how big your pictures are, you might have to go drink a coffee or whatever, go to the washroom and come back, and it might be done when you get back. However, it looks like this one isn't taking too long. It's going and it's chugging along. So like I said, panoramas are pretty nice in the fact that you can get a much bigger picture based off of the resolution of your camera, because again, each photo is going to retain its original resolution, which means that if you are working with, let's say, a 10 megapixel camera or higher, every time you add another picture, it's increasing the megapixels, it's increasing the total pixels of the picture. So it is making a much larger image. Now this is coming close to a finish here, I think. I don't want to get my hopes up in case it's still got a bit to go, but it looks, and when it's done, it's going to put all of those images together nicely into one seamless panorama image. Any second now, it's going to come up. I know it. We can see already on the side all the different layers. Okay, and there it is. So if I zoom in on this, you can see that it's done a really great job of stitching it together nicely. I don't see any noticeable seams between pictures. It has smoothly blended it together and it looks great. All right, one thing you might notice in your panoramas, when you're zoomed out in Photoshop, sometimes you'll see these white lines. I can kind of see one there. All right, you might see, oh, there's one kind of going through there. If I zoom in, they will disappear. It's a display issue with Photoshop, it seems. So if I look at my layers over on the right-hand side, we can see what it did. It took pieces of each individual photo. Okay, there's the first one. Turn on the next one. It's taking a little piece of that. Exactly as we would expect it to do, and until it finishes the entire picture. One thing I don't like about panoramas, but it's unavoidable, is that you do lose a little bit on the edges. So we have to take our crop tool, okay, click the crop tool, and what I'm going to do, whoops, is I'm just going to crop out the edges of the picture because they have check boxes. No problem. All right, so we're going to crop that out. We're going to get rid of that and clean up this panorama as much as we can. So let's just zoom out. Oh, it looks like my computer has fallen asleep. This happens a lot when you're doing panoramas because they are, again, very memory intensive on the machine. Okay, it looks like it's coming back slowly. And we're going to crop by pulling in with these blocks, these boxes. We're going to pull in and crop our image down. One thing I should have did in order to save the computer a little bit of trouble on the memory here is I should have oh, there we go. I should have flattened my layers first. Okay, but as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm just cropping out that little edge that is wavy. I could zoom in closer and get rid of it more closely to where it actually is cutting off. But there we go. I'm just going to hit enter, going to crop that out. I'm going to flatten my image. All right, almost there. As you can see, Photoshop is running really slow. Because like I said, we now have an image that's huge. It's much, much bigger than the original. We're going to flatten it. That'll make it a lot smaller. And now we can go in and just tweak it a bit with the crop tool. You can see I missed a little bit there. And so I'm going to take that crop tool. I'm going to just clean off those rough edges, like so. And get rid of the parts that were left behind there from, and usually that's just from shake. This was on a tripod, but it never, or very rarely rotates perfectly. The camera might have been a little bit unlevel and you get a little bit of an edge there. So there we go. There's the first one. Nice. Okay, so save that. I'm just going to save it as Panorama 1 to my desktop. And we're going to go on to a different style of working in panoramas in 1 second here. So save that. Okay, quality, I'm going to I could have left it as a Photoshop file. We're going to go just 12 and say OK, just to save time. Okay, so that's going to save. We've got our first one done. That's the most basic way of doing a panorama. The next one is, what if we're working with raw files? You know, we're taking the photos with our SLR, and now we're working with raw files. So let's just take a quick look. I got raw files here. Open up that folder, and inside we have a series of panorama images in RAW. When I was up at the Hoover Dam, you know, I thought, hey, that'll make a cool panorama. So, you know, I rested it on the ledge and I went all the way around. And so that was the thought, was that this would be a nice panorama. So we're going to, this time, start with just the first one of the series. We're going to open with Photoshop. Now, in this example, it's different because we're working with raw files. We could load our raw files into Photomerge, but that doesn't give us control over the color for the raw files, which is what we want. So what I could do is I could come in here and I could tweak, you know, my color settings, my exposure and my highlights and shadows, and just get it to an area, or get it to a point where I think it looks good. Okay, and it's getting there. It's not bad. I could go and I could tweak the colors individually in that, but for the sake of the tutorial and sake of time. Okay, so that's not bad. Now, I have a series of shots that I know were taken in exactly the same environment. There's no point in me doing this or writing down these settings over and over again. That just doesn't make sense. What we can do in the raw windows, we can make a preset, and you'll see these sliders over here, second from the end, called presets. We're going to make a new preset, and you do that by clicking the new preset button down here, and we're going to call it Pano and hit OK. Oh, I shouldn't have closed that window so fast. I'll make another one, but I'll cancel. What this does is it stores all the settings that you made in your raw file, so that if you have a series of shots that were taken in the same setting, all you got to do is choose your preset and it's going to set it up correctly. So now if I wanted to, I could hit Open Image, okay, and I could save it. But I'm not going to, and I'll tell you why in a second. Okay, so there's the first one. I'm going to close that off. Now let's say I'm doing the next one in the sequence, okay, which is a little bit more, you know, a turned view of the, you know, previous shot. Now all I have to do is go to Presets, click Pano, and my color's set up exactly the same, just like that. One click, and it's perfect. And I can hit Open Image, and I can keep doing that and saving each one. For the sake of time here, I've already got a folder called Hoover JPEGs. So these were already converted to JPEG using the exact same method I just showed you. Okay, so now we would go back and we would do the same sort of thing. We go Automate, Photomerge. Now that we have it in JPEGs that have been color corrected, we're going to go to Auto and we're going to go Browse. And we're going to find our folder, which I put on the desktop, Tutorials. So we're going to go to Hoover JPEG. We're going to select them all, holding Shift, get them all, and hit Open. We're going to hit OK. I'm going to let that go. Let that do its thing. Now, you're going to notice something different about this one. I didn't use a tripod for this one. I rested it on the ledge, and I did my best to try to keep it even as I took each photo. Now the problem with that is I'm going to have more shake. My camera was less level, and that should result in more wasted edges on this panorama. And let's just see if that's the case. As you can tell, again, it does take a while to put it together. Photoshop seems to you know, take quite a bit of time to put it together, but you will find that the results are generally really, really accurate, with the exception of a few weird things. Sometimes that happens, but it's putting it together. We're on the last stage here of this, and like I said, sometimes you can wait so long that you go take a coffee break and come back. So here's a good example. Like I said, yeah, I was wobbly because I was on a rail. I was standing on the bridge looking back at the Hoover Dam, and my camera dipped in the middle. So you can see as a result, even though it did stitch it together beautifully, if I look up close here and see all the detail, the wonderful detail I have in here. Look at that, we can even see a pink bus on the bridge. Okay, you can see that it's gone together beautifully. I'm not going to make the same mistake I did last time. I'm going to flatten this layer, or sorry, flatten this, flatten all layers. One thing I like to do with any photo, especially panoramas and landscape shots, is I like to sharpen it. So I'm going to go to Filter, I'm going to go to Sharpen, I'm going to go to Unsharp Mask, and I'm going to tweak these settings a bit. I'm going to bring the amount up. Okay, I'm going to bring the radius up. And what I'm watching for is the detail in the shot. So if I move this around, get the little before and after going on here, and when I'm happy with that, I'm going to hit OK. And you can see the difference if I go back in my history to the before and after. It's huge. Brings out all these little details that weren't that noticeable before. Okay, so now I'm going to crop it again. And just look at how much I lose when I don't use a tripod. Lose all of this here. I'm going to bring it on the side. This one I won't lose much at all on the side, a tiny bit. But look at the bottom. I bring that up and look at how much of the dam, for example, I lost. Huge amount. Okay, I got a guy's hand in here. I'm going to just crop that out too. I don't want his hand in my panorama. Now I hit enter. There's my new panorama with the edges taken off. So you can see that it's really important to use a tripod if you don't want to lose much of your photo. But you can see that it's stitched it together really seamlessly. It's really nice, lots of detail. And so that's, again, the benefit of doing a panorama is you get a much more detailed photograph. Okay, so I'm going to save that. Same deal, put it to the desktop. I'm going to call it Hoover. Oops, one sec. That wasn't to the desktop. Now it's to the desktop. Call it Hoover. Save it and hit OK. Good. Now, one last thing that I wanted to show is panoramas these days is, things like Google Maps where, they have Street View where they have these beautiful 360-degree panoramas. Now, how do you create those? Well, most of them are created by, it could be fisheye lenses. I know the Google car, for example, has a very unique system where it uses multiple cameras to stitch it together into a 360. But I'm going to show you how to do it if all you've got to work with is a standard lens. So I took a photo off the internet. I take no responsibility for this photo, strictly for educational purposes only. I did a search for 360-degree panoramas. And this is really easy to do. You just set up your tripod and go all the way around. Okay, and go full 360 degrees. So basically, this side where this ends, okay, is where the other side begins. All right, for it to be a true 360 degrees, the photo has to end at exactly the point where the other side begins. I hope that makes sense. So that's the case here. We've got this photo that is perfectly 360 degrees, and this is what we're going to work with. Now, the software that I'm using is called Panoramic VR. It's free trial download. That's what we're going to use in class here. And we're going to double-click this DMG file to install it. And we're going to get this really nasty-looking installer. We could drag it to the applications, but what I would do is just drag it to your desktop so that you can try it out and you can delete it if you, you're done with it after. Or if you want to support the software and buy it later, that's up to you. I'm just going to do that. As you can tell, it's already been installed, so it's going to just ask me to replace it. That's what I'll do. Okay, so now we got a piece of software which is specialized for VR, or virtual reality panoramas. So open that up. That's going to load, and we should get that showing up in a second here. Very, very simple software, nothing to it. And let me just show you how it works. Saying, oh yeah, you're using a trial version, we're just going to hit OK. Now, it asks you what your output is going to be. I'm going to set my output as QuickTime, because I like QuickTime. It's good for virtual panoramas. We're going to drag this 360-degree panorama into this kind of cross shape here. We're going to drop that into there. And right away you'll notice, there it is, it shows up. Now we're going to go to Add, and we're just going to change a couple of the settings here. First of all, in the HTML tab, we're going to say no HTML file, turn that off. We're going to go back to the settings and it's going to say, what do you want to call it? We're going to call it, first of all, we're going to set it to the desktop, and we're just going to call it 300, just take this front end off of here, call it 360-degree panorama, and we're going to save it. Okay, so desktop 360 panorama, hit OK. It says, do you want to create the output file? Yes. It says, oh, it must be saved before you can create it, so say OK. Save it to the desktop as well, save, and there it goes. It's going to create this file on the desktop. Now, what does the file look like? The file shows up as an MOV file, a movie file. Okay, and it looks like it's still. Open it with QuickTime, and as you can see, it opened up automatically with QuickTime. We can scale this up, we can view it in full screen, and we can move around the picture. This is what's cool about 360-degree panoramas. We can create these panorama worlds. Now you might be wondering, what the heck are all those little black things on there? That's because we're using the trial. That's their watermark. So if you are interested in creating these and not having that in there, I suggest you buy the software and do it that way. But as you can see, very cool. And it's something that we're pretty familiar with nowadays, especially. You can zoom in on it. Okay, so I can zoom in, I can see all that detail, or I can zoom out. Again, getting more detail per shot. That's why we do the panorama. I can see who these guys are. And it's kind of fun. All right, you can think of projects that you might want to create panoramas for. It's kind of cool. Okay, so I'm just going to hit escape here. We did that. That's all finished up. I'd like to see you guys try to make different panoramas, see what you can come up with, try different things. Look for environments that are interesting and things that would make or be a good candidate for panoramas. Try some of these techniques and hope to see you come up with some creative ideas. Talk to you later.